So today I want to talk about how I saved a nationwide healthcare project. And when I say I don't mean I alone, but I and my team and everything we did to make sure that the project wasn't derailed. And at the end of this, I'll show you a video from the client on what their experience was working with us. Now, in 2019, we got a call. No, I think we got an email to place a bid for a particular project that was going to take place for a nationwide healthcare project. So we got the email, we prepared our bid, and we submitted. A couple of weeks later, we got a response telling us that we were not successful. Right? So, and I followed up to say, could they explain to us why we didn't make it? And they said the reason was because, we came second, and the reason was because we didn't have direct experience with healthcare projects. And I was like, fine, no problem. And then we forgot about it. Now, by the end of the year, and I think this was early 2019, by December 2019, or I think in January 2020, we got another email saying that we should bid for the project. And I was wondering, maybe they never got the project started and it's only now they want to start, but why are they asking us to bid again? But anyways, we went ahead and we placed a bid. And what happened was we found out that they had actually built the project for a year, but they encountered a lot of issues. And this time around, they wanted to hand it over to another developer. So let me give you the background of who or what the project is all about. So there's an NGO in the US that was looking to execute a project, a healthcare project in Nigeria. So they were looking for a team that could help them build this project and deliver it. So what they ended up doing was they gave the project to a particular team in the UK. And this team in the UK outsourced it to a team in India. And they worked on the project for 1 year. And this was from 2019. I think the bid was maybe late 2018, and then they ran the project through 2019 to 2020 when we got contacted. So we bid for the 2019, but we were not successful because we didn't have healthcare experience. And then by 2020, they came back to us saying we should bid again, and this time around we were successful. And it turns out that what they wanted to do was they had to localize the development of that project. So outsourcing it to a company outside of Nigeria wasn't going to work. And that was how we came in. So by the time we took on that project, they had a bunch of concerns and issues. And these issues, one, they were required to use a local dev team. That was one of the requirements. Secondly, the project was running behind schedule, as most software projects do. And for us, by the time they contacted us, we had the challenge of taking over an existing project. and not just an anyhow kind of project. It's a real production project. I think they had released a few versions that were being used as at the point they got us involved. So if any of you have been involved in any kind of software project, you know it is quite hard to study, read, and understand someone's code to the point whereby you're even able to understand it in time with the pressure of being behind and all the things they wanted to do piled on top and make significant progress. And that was the situation we were in. So how did I get this resolved? So the first thing I did when I got involved with this project was to carry out workshops. I found out where the core of their team was. I think they were based in Lagos. So I flew out there, spent 2 weeks with their core team, talking to different stakeholders, the team that runs the activities on ground, the team that runs the operations, their leadership team, and their third-party partners. I had workshops and discussions with all of them. And so let me tell you what the project was really about. So the project was trying to find a way of stopping the manual use of documents and manual processes in tracking and dealing with TB in Nigeria. Because manual processes was leading to a drop in detection rates, in testing rates, in reporting rates, and thereby was hindering, the prevention of the spread of the disease. So they felt if we digitize these processes, they could identify people who are presumptive earlier, test them earlier, get results earlier, and get people on treatment earlier, and those that were missed will be captured and handled all at the same time, therefore reducing the cases and the spread of the disease. That was their core objective with that project. So after the workshop and talking to all the stakeholders, I think we had around 200 items, requirements. Different stakeholders, what they wanted to do next, what they had planned, what they had learned, what they needed to adjust. All of that amounted to around 200 items. We want this, the system should do this, should be able to do that. 200 items or thereabout. I think it's a little bit higher than 200. And again, since it was a funded project, right? It was a funded project. They had deadlines and they were running behind. So 200 items included everything they had planned to do, what they had learned, and what they needed, to include or add. Now, this posed a challenge for me and my team because generally, developers would prefer to start a project afresh, start from the ground up. So my team was telling me, let's just scrap everything that has been built in the past 1 year and build afresh, which sounded really good and I thought would work. But after giving it a bit more thought, I tried to convince them that we shouldn't do that because the project was already live. They had concrete deadlines. And they had new requirements. Starting the project afresh to me was just a recipe for disaster. So I had to convince my team to let them know that we need to get ourselves into the minds of the previous developers understand everything they have done, considering their constraints. So we shouldn't point fingers and say, oh, they didn't write this code well, they didn't do that part well. I told them they must have been under a lot of pressure. They must have had, situations whereby they had to do things a certain way, hoping to pick up some technical debt and resolve those issues later on. And then when their project just gets cut halfway, you certainly come into the code base and find things that don't look so right. So we shouldn't point fingers. We should instead try and understand what they were trying to do, what they have done, and what the constraints might have been. Look at the new requirements and see how we could make everything work together. It took a bit of effort, but they agreed with me because it was going to force the developers to read a lot of code. I don't remember the lines of code, but there was, I think tens of thousands of lines of code across the components of the system. So that's what we agreed to do. Now, what we inherited in terms of the architecture of the system was they had an API. And this API was written in Node.js. They used MongoDB for storage persistence. So here they had MongoDB. Then there was a client, a mobile client, an Android client. So here they had, they had Android here. So there was an Android client connecting to a Node-based API, and everything was stored in MongoDB. Now, because we had to understand all of this, and yes, I forgot to mention they had a very important component as well, which is the web dashboard. This is where management gets to see all the reports generated across the country, all the data points, testing, those are presumptive, those have been tested, those have been confirmed, and those have taken their drugs on treatment and all of that. So there was a web-based dashboard here. And this was written in AngularJS. So we had Node, Angular, Android. I think the Android application was written in Java and MongoDB. If we had started this project from scratch, there are a lot of choices we wouldn't have made in terms of the technologies used. But anyways, we took it up, and by the time we were done with the project, we had understood what they had built. We created more APIs. I think we had another API so we made it microservices based. We had another API here for I think a particular type of user that's meant for monitoring. So this API was written in Java. So we had a Java backend here, I think it's Spring, which connected, the app connected to it. So you could log in as a type of user and you get your data from here. We fetched data from the MongoDB. We had to use that. But the reports were becoming very, very slow. And we had challenges with that. So what we did was we built a new reporting platform. And here what we used was a very simple, I think, Bootstrap web dashboard. We use Bootstrap, and just HTML, CSS, and so on. Just very simple Bootstrap and vanilla JS type of solution here for the web dashboard. So we decommissioned this. This was decommissioned, and the new dashboard was fetching data from this API for a start. But eventually what we did was the reporting data that was stored here was the real cause of the system being slow, because you have, for reporting, this was optimized. The MongoDB was optimized for writes, for capturing data and writing it very easily. But if you wanted to pull out reports and show it in a dashboard and aggregate that data, it was very hard to do. So instead of relying on Mongo for reporting, we built out a reporting database, and this was done in MySQL. So what we will do is data that is captured all still goes into MongoDB, but then we had a reporting API. So sorry, this wasn't directly connected like this. We built another API, a Java backend, which was for reports. Right, so we had a report API here, similar to the API we built for the new user. And this report API would fetch data from MongoDB every 12 hours and populate it into the reporting database. So we had MySQL for reports. And whenever you use the web dashboard, the new one we built, it would fetch data from this API working with the periodic reports that come from here. So we only had about a 12-hour lag in between data refresh. So we did all of this, understanding the code base, taking up each and every one of those 200 requirements and integrating them, building them into the system. So the team did a really good job of understanding what was written and coming up with new services, and backends. All these were added to the system, and we made it work together. At the end of the day, we ended up building another client, an iOS client, which had a subset of the functionality of the Android app. Right? So we had an iOS client there, also fetching data from the main API for the operation of the app. So it was a bit rough at the beginning, but towards the end of the project, the client was really happy. They were really impressed, and they liked the outcome of the project. And I think the single most important thing that gave us success here was the fact that we didn't decide to scrap everything that was built before we got involved to start afresh. We instead forced ourselves to understand the code base, as painful as it was, while expanding it with new services, integrating everything, and making sure we handled existing bugs, new requirements, and the deadlines which the client had. And they were happy with it. So I think as a developer, it's a fact that you're going to read more code than you write. You would most likely join teams that already exist, that already have a code base, and you would have to read and understand a lot of code. So don't despise that. Always try and put yourself in the situation of the developer that wrote it. Try and understand why they wrote the code that way, and don't point fingers immediately. If you see some bad areas of the code and you have the time, refactor that code, because we did a lot of refactoring in what we did as we were working on the code, refactoring and writing new features. And if you do it that way, it would give you, you get lots of hands-on experience, and I believe it makes you a better developer. If you got any value out of this video, please like and subscribe. I think at the moment we have below 50 subscribers. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers as quickly as possible. So if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, please subscribe, like the video, share it if you believe people in your network will find it useful.